Okay, so ready to dive into this. We're tackling creativity today. And I think we all want to be more creative, right? So we're going to be breaking down the psychology of creativity, and hopefully we'll all come out of this with some brilliant ideas.
Well, what I find fascinating is that it's not like some, magical ability that only certain people have. It's actually something that's inside all of us,
Yeah.
and we can actually work on it and develop it.
Right, like you don't have to be like the next Picasso or something. So, from a psychology standpoint, how do they actually define creativity? Because I have a feeling it's not just like painting a picture.
It's way more than just artistic talent. A good way to think about it is that it's the ability to come up with something new, but it also has to be useful.
Mm.
So that could be anything from like a huge invention to, I don't know, a new marketing plan, or even just a really clever way to fix something around the house.
Yes, love that. It's like figuring out how to like cram all those leftovers into the fridge. Like that's using your creativity right there. But I'm really curious, like when we have those aha moments, what's actually happening in our brains? Is it like, are some people just born more creative than others?
Well, while our genes might have a little something to do with it, the psychology of creativity actually points out that there are certain psychological factors that have a way bigger impact on, how creative we are.
Okay, so tell us, what are these factors? Spill the beans.
So one of the most important ones is something called, get this, openness to experience. And I don't just mean like loving to go hiking or anything, although that's great. It's more about being open to new ideas and new experiences and kind of pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, so like if you're feeling stuck creatively, maybe it's time to finally try that new restaurant you've been wanting to go to, or maybe like finally sign up for that improv class you've been thinking about.
You know it. Because the more open you are to all these different things, the more you're kind of filling up your mind with like interesting stuff. And then that gives you all these different ideas and experiences to work with when you're trying to be creative.
Right, that makes total sense. Okay, so what about like that drive to create? Is that something we're born with, or can you actually like build that up?
And that drive is actually something that psychologists have a name for, and it's called intrinsic motivation. And it's super important when it comes to creativity. It basically means that you're doing something because you genuinely love it and it's fun for you, not because you're trying to win a prize or because someone's making you do it.
Yeah.
Think about those times when you get so wrapped up in something that you totally lose track of time.
Oh, yeah.
That's intrinsic motivation at work, and that's when you're going to be your most creative.
Totally. It's like being in the zone. You know what I mean? Like the ideas just flow out of you. So does that mean that if we're not feeling that like inner spark, are we just out of luck?
Not at all. It's about finding what really clicks with you. Like, what are you naturally drawn to? What are you excited about? And the psychology of creativity really emphasizes that, like, when you're doing something you're truly passionate about, that's when you're going to unlock your creative potential.
So if you're sitting there trying to force yourself to write a sci-fi novel, but what you really love is like, I don't know, baking,
Right.
maybe you need to switch gears.
Exactly. Because maybe like designing those amazing cakes is actually your creative outlet, and that's awesome. The psychology of creativity is all about, embracing those passions because that's usually where our best creative work comes from.
I'm really liking this whole embrace your passions thing. But I'm also curious about how much of an impact like our actual surroundings have on our creativity. Can where we are really affect how creative we are?
Absolutely. The psychology of creativity is really clear about that. Our environment, and I mean both our physical space and the people we surround ourselves with, it all makes a huge difference. Think about it like this.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with it. Like, I love a good analogy.
Imagine you have a plant, right? And you stick it in this dark corner, you don't give it much room, and you barely water it. It might survive, but it's definitely not going to, grow and be healthy. But if you take that same plant and give it tons of sunlight, good soil, and plenty of space to grow, that thing is going to be thriving.
So, are you saying that our creative minds need that same kind of environment? Like, we need to be nurtured to be our most creative selves?
100%. We need to feel encouraged to explore new things. We need people around us who value different perspectives. And it really helps to have people who can give us helpful feedback. Basically, we need a space where it's okay to try new things, take risks, and yeah, even make some mistakes along the way.
Right. Because sometimes those mistakes are actually how we discover awesome new things. So then, how do we actually do that? How can we make that kind of like creatively stimulating environment for ourselves? It's like we need to be our own creative gardeners or something, right? Like we've got to make sure the soil is just right, so to speak, for those innovative ideas to blossom. So are there any like gardening tips from the psychology of creativity that we can use for ourselves?
Totally. One really powerful technique is to get rid of that inner critic,
Mhm.
like especially when you're just starting to brainstorm, just let those ideas flow without judging them, no matter how crazy they might seem.
Yes, I love that because sometimes, someone will just throw out this totally off the wall idea and then boom, it's like it sparks this whole chain reaction and suddenly everyone's coming up with these amazing out of the box solutions.
Exactly. Sometimes those like seemingly out there ideas are actually the seeds of real innovation.
Mm.
And this actually ties in perfectly with how the psychology of creativity breaks down the whole creative process.
Yeah.
Like it's not just about those, random aha
Yeah.
moments. It's actually this super interesting journey with different stages.
Okay, I am here for it. Tell me everything about these stages. I'm a sucker for a good process breakdown.
Me too. So the first stage is preparation. And this is all about actively gathering information, really diving deep into whatever problem you're trying to solve or whatever topic you're exploring. It's like you're giving your brain all the ingredients it needs to start cooking up those creative ideas.
So no more waiting around for inspiration to hit us on the head. We actually have to like do our research and stuff.
Yep. But it's not as boring as it sounds.
Right.
Like this could include things like brainstorming, free writing, just jotting down any ideas that come to mind, even if they're kind of out there.
Oh, okay.
Just letting that problem simmer for a bit.
Okay, I can get down with that. But this is where it gets kind of interesting to me. The next stage is called incubation. And what they're saying is that we need to actually like step away from the problem for a bit.
Yep, you heard that right.
Wait, so you mean to tell me that one of the best things we can do to be more creative is to like go for a walk or do the dishes or something?
It seems counterintuitive, but yeah.
Because that's something I'm really good at.
Right.
But is that really what they're saying in the psychology of creativity?
It is.
Yeah.
Because what happens during incubation is that while you're off doing other things, walking the dog, whatever, your subconscious mind is actually working hard behind the scenes,
Yeah.
making connections you didn't even realize were there. It's like when you plant a seed, right? You can't just like stare at it and expect it to sprout. You have to give it time to do its thing underground.
Wow. Okay, so all those times I've been daydreaming instead of working on a problem, that was actually like part of my creative process. This is blowing my mind right now.
It totally is.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, it's actually during those incubation periods that the third stage hits illumination. That's your big aha moment, that sudden burst of insight or that, feeling of like, oh, I've got it.
Okay, I love it. But what happens after that light bulb goes off? Are we done? Do we just like declare ourselves creative geniuses and call it a day?
Not quite. The psychology of creativity emphasizes that there's one more crucial stage, and that's verification. This is where you take that raw, like, spark of an idea and mold it into something real and concrete.
So it's like taking that initial burst of inspiration and turning it into something substantial.
Exactly.
It's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Yeah, and this stage is often where collaboration comes in, getting feedback from other people, bouncing ideas around, maybe even going back to the drawing board a few times.
Yeah. It's like that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Right.
Like sometimes you really need that energy from other people to make a creative vision a reality. But you know what I love about the psychology of creativity is that it's not just about like understanding how creativity works, but it's actually really empowering because it shows us that like we all have the potential to be creative thinkers. It's like we're not just like sitting around waiting for a bolt of creative lightning to strike us, We can actually make our own lightning.
That's a great way to put it. The psychology of creativity is all about reminding us that creativity is a skill, not some like magical gift that some people are just born with. And like any skill, you can get better at it with practice and by, learning the right techniques.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? If you had to pick like just a couple of key takeaways from the psychology of creativity, what would be your top tips for someone who's like, I want to be more creative. How do I make it happen?
Well, we've touched on a few of them already, but it's worth saying them again. First of all, never stop being curious.
Yeah.
Be like a lifelong learner, always exploring new ideas, new experiences, different ways of looking at things.
I love that. Like the world is your oyster, right? But you've got to be curious enough to actually want to open it up and see what's inside.
Exactly. And you'd be surprised how often Something that seems totally random or unrelated to what you're working on can actually spark an amazing new idea. Oh, and another big one. Don't be afraid to fail.
Okay, so we're going to need to unpack that one a little bit because, to be honest, failure and I, not exactly best friends.
I get it. I totally do. But one of the things that the psychology of creativity talks about is that a lot of times those setbacks and those, so-called failures, those are actually the moments when we learn the most. So instead of looking at them as like the end of the world, what if we tried to see them as opportunities to grow and figure out what works better next time?
So it's about changing that voice in our heads from, oh, I messed up again, to like, that's interesting. What can I learn from this?
Yes, exactly.
It's about embracing that growth mindset, even when it's hard.
100%. And one last thing, and this is a big one. Remember that having a supportive environment can make a world of difference when it comes to being creative. So surround yourself with people who inspire you, who challenge you to think differently, and who can give you, honest and helpful feedback.
It's so true. Like having that space where you feel comfortable taking risks and trying new things, that is so important. It's like having your own personal cheerleading squad.
Mm.
They're there to cheer you on, encourage you to keep going, even when you start to doubt yourself.
Absolutely. And don't forget to be your own cheerleader, too. Like, be kind to yourself throughout this whole creative process. It's a journey, not a race, right? There are going to be ups and downs, twists and turns, maybe even a few U-turns along the way.
Ugh, tell me about it. But this has been such a great deep dive. We've learned so much about how creativity isn't this like mysterious thing that we have no control over. It's part of who we are, and we all have the power to tap into it.
Totally. And what I love about the psychology of creativity is that it gives us all these practical tools and insights to not only understand how creativity works, but also to create the conditions where it can flourish.
Yes, it's like we're not just at the mercy of like some magical muse or whatever. We actually have the power to shape our own creative destinies. Okay, so before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a little something to think about. What's one small thing you can do today, like literally today, to invite a little more creativity into your life?
Ooh, I love that. It could be anything from finally checking out that new bookstore you've been wanting to visit to, I don't know, trying a recipe you've never made before, or even just giving yourself permission to like sit and daydream for a few minutes. You never know what those little sparks of inspiration might lead to.
So good. And on that note, it's time for us to say goodbye. But remember, keep being curious, be kind to yourselves, and keep those creative sparks flying. We'll catch you next time.